So I have to tell you that I am not as modest as our speaker tonight. When I asked Dr. Niskanen...
You told me to introduce myself. You haven't heard it.
That's not true. I said, do you have some stories to do your intro? And he said, I'll do my own intro. But I'm not as modest, and I'm not a very good listener. So before I let him do his own intro, I just have to tell you about one of my experiences with Dr. Niskanen. I met him in May of 2013 when Stephanie and I were finishing our master's degree in Baltimore. And Stephanie had contacted him, telling him we had an idea for a wellness clinic and asked if he'd hear it out. So he took a break from his conference to listen to us very closely and carefully, and when we finished, he said, "That's good. I think that when you pitch to the senior administrative board, you shouldn't talk about knee replacements, but other than that, that's good." And I looked at Stephanie and said, "So do we have an in with Sky Lake's board?" And we did. And so in short, we owe our jobs to Grant Niskanen.
My neck's on the line now.
So give us really good evals, guys. It's rare that you find a physician that's so immersed in clinical care and so universally loved by those around him. When talking to the residents who work at the hospital with him, he's continually listed as the physician that they most admire, not only for his intelligence and work ethic, but also for his patience and kindness as well. You will be hard-pressed to find anyone in Klamath that knows as much about medicine as Dr. Niskanen. You will also be hard-pressed to find anyone who exemplifies the importance of exercise as much as Dr. Niskanen. Always an athlete, he was on the Olympic rowing team where he tirelessly had to practice. When his rowing career was over, he moved on to a somewhat easier path, that of medicine. He continues to be an avid cyclist and golfer. In fact, he was the only resident of Klamath last year to complete the infamous Death Ride, which is a 129-mile ride that consists of 15,000 feet of climbing. So he is a role model for all of us, not only in his career, but in exercise as well, and we are very lucky to have him here with us tonight. Woo.
Okay, so I was told to talk about motivation. And I normally don't talk about motivation. Normally I talk about either how to do something or how to learn something. And so this was totally, and I'm about as far away from a psychiatrist as one could be. And if you talk to my wife, who's also well known in this community, she's a school nurse, she's like, "You're talking about motivation?" Because I've tried everything to motivate her. It was very interesting, the difference between her and I. Now, the first thing is I appreciate everything that Catherine said. Now, let me just make sure I have the right button here. I wasn't a rower. I was an Olympic flat water kayaker. And this is kayaking. And these are women. The men are like really scary looking. So it's a very upper body oriented sport. It's not very competitive in the U.S. This is the 2008 Olympics. That's a Ukrainian on the left there that's about to win the gold medal. And that's actually a very interesting person. She actually raced in the 1984 Olympics. She won a silver medal in this Olympics. She's German by birth, but then married her Italian coach and then raced for Italy. And she's still competing in her mid-40s at a very high level at this time. So it's Olympic flat water, and it's very much like rowing. We actually do the same courses, but we just do everything looking ahead where we're going. And the rowers hate us because they're always trying to figure out where we are, and we're just darting around them. So my background is, and looking at my wife, she was also a world championship caliber kayaker as well, but she was a slalom paddler. The flat water kayakers are just straight line speed, a lot of strength, a lot of endurance, where the slalom is much more skilled to get in and out of the gates and handle the light water. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and what's interesting, she grew up in New England. Her dad was an avid canoeist, kayaker, and really pushed her into the sport. From the age of like 7, 8, 9, she was paddling all the time. My parents could care less what I did. When I was, well, they did care. When I was 4 years old, my parents noticed that my 2-year-old brother was talking more than me. And they're like, "Oh, maybe this is something wrong." So they had me examined, and I actually had a large tumor on the brain on the right side of my head. So between that age and age 12, I had a major surgery almost every year, was never allowed to run, play sports, do anything. At 12, and compared to my wife, at 12, she was already on the national circuit kayaking. At 12, I was staring outside my window looking at people playing baseball. There was a sports field just right next to our house where we lived in Washington, D.C. And so all I ever wanted to do was just run and play sports. And at 12, I was given the okay. I was cured. Let's go out and do everything. My first one, I played soccer. I was in 7th grade. It was the first organized sport I played. And we had to run 5 miles for the first workout. I ran it as hard as I possibly could barely walk afterwards. But then from then on, I just craved sports and just did any sport possible. And then became a decent enough runner. Didn't start swimming until I was 15, but did swim in a Division I college when I went to college. I couldn't do butterfly to save my life, but I could do, in fact, the only stroke I started out was backstroke because I didn't have to worry about breathing then. I was at the University of Maryland and swam and ran track for Maryland. I had the honor of being the slowest person on the swim team and the track team. The main reason they kept me there, now Maryland's track team at that time was second in the NC2A, so we had one of the most powerful track teams. Our swim team wasn't as powerful. The main reason they kept me there was because I kept everyone else from failing out, so I tutored a lot of the athletes. Then I ended up trying kayaking one day, and it's just very similar to swimming, kind of upper body. And then I was at a shop one day, and I was like 18 years old, and this guy's, I was looking at a boat, it was like $700 or $800. I didn't have that money at that time. And he said, well, I have an old boat I can give you. So he just gave me a boat, gave me a paddle. So I would just go out on the local lakes or take it even to swim practice, learn how to roll it, do things like that. Then the next year I'd enter like a little race in the DC area. Then after that, it was just so much easier, and I did so much better compared to swimming and track, that I started going on the national circuit and then eventually made the international teams and started living in Europe and traveling over there. And I did that for 10 years. And then eventually I woke up and realized that you can't make much money as a kayaker. And so I became a cyclist. And then I went through the same thing for 3 years, got invited to the Olympic training camp for cycling. And I thought, Jesus, I'm like 30-some years old now, and all I've ever done is cycle and kayak, and tried to get a job, and everyone asked what your experience was. So I applied to med school and got in. So definition, motivation is what caused us to act. So everything we do in life, something caused us to do it. Whether it's going to the bathroom, whether it's to eat, whether it's to go for a run, whether it's to go to sleep, something, whether it's an instinct, something evolutionary, something that gives us reward. Everything that we do, there's some kind of motivation that and it may not be something we think of. So there's multiple ways to motivate someone. Like I could motivate you all to get up and run quickly if I started a fire in this room. So the overview of this talk, we're going to look at theories of motivation. And again, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. We're going to look at some examples of some research-oriented workouts, because I still work out, not a lot, nothing compared to like a new and Sean up there, but I still play around for a half hour most days. I'll give you some of my personal tips that help me out. At the end, I'll try to give you some motivational stories of some runners who throughout my life, I've really found them to be pretty special people. So theories of motivation. Now, don't all fall asleep here. Instinct, this is evolutionary driven. This is sort of, we've come up through millions of years, we've developed some way. There's things that we do that we don't even think about, but it's because of what our forefathers did, and the ones that didn't make it, they're not a lot rounding ones that did, there's something that made them able to survive in this kind of environments. Incentive, internal, external rewards, something that maybe makes you feel good inside, or someone's just going to give you a lot of money if you win this race. Drive, to relieve internal tension. Arousal, some people, they do drugs for their arousal, either to speed them up with methamphetamine, or they use narcotics to slow them down. And the arousal states are something that as humans we like to play around with quite a bit because it makes us feel better. And then humanistic is we think that there's reasons we want to do something, so it's much more cognitive. And there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we'll go over that just briefly. So Maslow was a psychologist, and he came up with this, that there's sort of this pyramid, and if you don't do the base of the pyramid, it's hard to get up to the top of the pyramid. So physiological down the bottom, we all need to breathe. Like if you try to hold your breath, after about a minute, you're going to feel this motivation to start breathing again. We need food, we need water, we need sex, sleep, and we need to poop. And then once we're able to do that, and if you can't do that, you're not going to worry about the stuff that's above you. And then after that, security, employment, family, health, property. Then after that, you start thinking about friendships and family. Exercise sort of fits in the esteem part. That makes us feel good about something or makes other people feel good about us. And then you get to the point where I am now as I'm at the waning edges of my athletic career, where I'm kind of accepting the fact that I'm getting slow, old, and fat. So instinct. So here's a prehistoric man kind of looking at it from the London Museum at the visitors are staring at him. So we are actually built to run, almost more than any other animal on Earth. We're actually very good distance runners. If you look at the chimpanzee here compared to Kim Kardashian, the butt is the biggest difference. The chimpanzee almost has no gluteus, either minimus or maximus. Kim Kardashian is known for her gluteus. The gluteus is the major propellant for moving someone forward when they run. And so runners tend to have fairly highly developed. The sprinters often have quite large gluteus maximus, but that's the main muscle for propelling someone forward. This is a chimpanzee that was trained to walk in a treadmill, yet when he was off the treadmill, he would use his upper body because that's how chimpanzees get around, and you can see he's much more developed. A chimpanzee can lift up 400 pounds without thinking of it. They're much more developed up top, but they really have trouble walking even a quarter mile if they had to. And here you talk about world-class sprinters. Usain Bolt winning the 2012 London Olympics. And you can see those guys, if you ever watch, I had the opportunity once to watch a World Championships in track and field and actually be on the field. And the sprinters come out and they're all got huge butts. They're all pretty muscular, but their butts are just incredibly muscular. They get back into their blocks and they're just poised, ready to go. And so these are the things that move people, is that gluteus muscle. Hips and torso. We also have a way to be able to run to increase our stride length by counterbalancing with our upper body. So our hips have developed to be able to have that kind of stride. No other animal is able to switch the stride around like we are. Slow versus fast twitch. How fast can a cheetah get to 60 miles per hour? 0 to 60. Half a stride.
Wow.
Max speed is 70 miles per hour. It can only last about 200 meters, and then it has to stop. So it trying to gets up close enough, then there's just a sudden burst of speed, it gets its kill, and then that's it. If it doesn't, if it goes over 200 meters, the elk, or not the elk, but the gazelle or whatever is going to get away and live another day. This is Wilson Kipsang. He's the world record holder in the marathon. He runs a 2:03 marathon. He runs a 1:58 half marathon, and he's almost 90% slow twitch. Humans, we tend to be slow, but we tend to last a long time. We can almost run forever, and unlike the cheetah, we can never approach 70 miles per hour. In fact, Usain Bolt can only approach 30 miles per hour and can only do it for just a portion of his 100-meter race. Yet we can maintain nearly a 4:30 pace for 26 miles, and sometimes even some of the ultra marathons. So really set up to be a distance running machine. So this is your first quiz. Who would win a 20-mile race? A sled dog, a world-class thoroughbred, or a human runner? And they actually have these races. Most of the races are horses versus man. They have one in Arizona, and they also have one in Scotland every year. So who wins? How many go for the dog? How many go for the horse? How many go for the human? And the right answer is, it depends on the temperature. And the main reason is, we're also adapted to run for a long time in hot temperatures. And so this is the Badwater Marathon. If any of you have been to Death Valley, at this race, this was 2013, it was 118 degrees that day. It's a 100-mile race. Actually, is it 100 miles or slightly? It's a 100-mile race, and it's run in the middle of the day, and you have to have your own support crew. One year, the most fun part I saw, they had a guy that was, his support crew had a van, it was towing a coffin full of ice, and he would go lie down it every once in a while. Now, this poor dog to the left here, the only way he can cool himself off is by panting and an exchange of air back and forth. And when he kind of get maxed out there, so if you've ever gone running with a dog in the heat, they try their darndest to stay with you, but you can actually kill a dog. In fact, one of our residents was playing around with the dog in Moore Park one year when it was hot, and the dog just was playing, and then dropped dead from a heat stroke. And my wife, when I first moved here, we had a golden retriever, and I would go for runs, and it was an 80-degree day. I had 2 water bottles with me. I gave all the water to the dog. It was a 10-mile run back up the hills behind the hospital here, and I thought I was doing fine. And then I noticed, and what happens, the dog would always run ahead of me, and as it gets tired, it'd start to run next to me, and then it'd start to run behind me. And I looked back, and I didn't see the dog. And I'm like, oh shit. So I run back, and here's the dog. It's on a steep sandy hill we had run up like 5 minutes before, and he's trying to run up, or she is trying to run up this hill, but she can't get her legs up, and she's just pawing. And I thought, oh God, I killed my wife's dog. So I picked up the dog, put it on my shoulders, ran the next mile, got in the house, threw the dog in the bathtub, threw a bunch of ice cubes in it, turned the cold water on, and like 15 minutes later, it was better. But my wife is like yelling, and why are you taking a shower? Whatever. So she knows the story now, but then she would have killed me. So animals, humans, their ability to sweat, and that's one of the biggest differences between men and women. We're in much better heat as men. We have many more sweat glands per cubic centimeter of skin than women. But when it starts to get cold, women actually do very well. In fact, a lot of the distance records in swimming are actually held by women because heat's not a factor in those races. And the same thing, the cutoff part for the dogs, and that's why a sled dog can pull forever at the Iditarod, because it's like 0 degrees, 20 degrees, or something like that. They couldn't do that if it was 50 or 60 degrees. The cutoff, the 2 races in Arizona, Scotland, the cutoff is 60 degrees. Whenever it's been colder than 60 degrees, the horse wins. Warmer than 60 degrees, the human wins. So the athletic accomplishments of prehistoric man, when we were developing, what we probably did way before we ever invented weapons or anything is we just ran down game. Now game was much faster than us, but we just put in a steady trot and we just kept after, and the gazelle would keep sprinting, it'd start to overheat, then collapse, and that was dinner that night. So man got very good at chasing down game. Now you can play this game here if you want and chase down a deer. I've chased down 2 deer. I did one a couple years ago, and when I lived back in Washington, D.C. Now don't chase down a buck, because after a while they'll stop running. Go for a doe. But you can actually, takes about an hour, and they'll just keep bounding away. You just keep steadily after them, and eventually they'll lie down and they can't go any further. So, and that's probably how prehistoric man hunted before they had weapons. So they're able to just run down their prey after an hour or so because they just got too overheated on the African plains. And so the prehistoric man, this was an Australian researcher, but he was sort of looking at what athletic feats prehistoric man could accomplish, and he thinks they could have run faster than Usain Bolt. Now the thing is, your life being chased by a tiger, a lion, or whatever, probably did depend on how quick you could be. What was interesting is the way he decided is he found some riverbeds that had footprints of people running, and he measured the stride length, and the stride length was actually greater than Usain Bolt. And so these people were running at high speed, putting their footprints in a sort of a muddy bank along a river, and that's how he decided that these guys could run faster than Usain Bolt. In the 1800s, English explorers would go into Africa. They'd look at the Tutsi tribesmen, and one of the physical feats you have to do to become a man is jump over your height. And they actually had boys that were 12, 13, 14 years old jumping up to 7 feet that they were measured by these British explorers. Aborigines have been measured to throw their spears 100 meters. The javelin world record is 90 meters. Neanderthal women had 10% more muscle mass than modern man, and they're probably very good at deadlifting. But modern man, the average woman was probably 5'2", that was Neanderthal, the average man was 5'5". So we're taller and we have much longer limbs than Neanderthal. So we just have to hold them off. So humans have evolved to run long distances. We do it better than any other animal out there. We're not quick, we're not strong. Almost every animal out there is much stronger and quicker than we are, but we can just last. And it's because we have the large gluteal muscle, we're able to have that hip torso counter rotation, we have a predominance of slow twitch fibers, we have the ability to sweat, and then probably most importantly is we also have the ability to remember where we ran and in the location of food and water, because if you just went off tracking off a gazelle, forgot where you were, or forgot where the water is and couldn't get back to your tribe that night, you probably didn't survive very long. So this sort of was selected for people who had large brains, which we hopefully have. So as I told you before, this is a deer. Again, if you can find a piece of land that is not too hard, because what they'll tend to do is try to go to the thickest parts of the forest, but if you can find them, you can run them down in about an hour. And there was actually an article in the Herald News this summer about some guy who used to do that at Ashland for fun. So incentive theory. We all need incentives to do things in life. So just genetically, we're programmed to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Most of us are. If you're not, then you'll be in the hospital and seeing a psychiatrist. Pleasure can come in many different forms. It can be internal, it can be self-satisfaction, self-esteem, some of that feelings of endorphins, and we'll talk a little bit more. Endorphins, do you know how they got that word? Endo is endogenous, so it's from within. And the orphan is morphine, so it's endogenous morphine. So it's kind of like with running, we can make our own drugs that make us feel better. And now you can sort of see some of the attraction towards some of the drugs that are out there on the street that people have used, because it gives them the same feeling that we get from running, and maybe even a little bit more. In the external, you can be praised, like your parents say, oh, you're really doing a good job, and all the kids on the soccer team that lost in the first round get trophies. You get prizes, money, promotion at work. So one of the things to keep motivated to do an exercise regimen or to run is figure out what motivates you. Is it a sense of accomplishment? I just want to look good. There are a number of people that just want to look a certain way, and in order to do it, they feel like they need to exercise. It could be social. My wife is a social athlete, and she doesn't mind me saying that. I can go out and just run and do everything by myself and never see anyone for a week. She can't go to the gym unless there's someone going with her. Family, again, some people like to exercise with family. I had two sisters that in my previous practice, they're both in their 50s. Since high school, they walked 5 miles every night, 5 days a week for their entire, and that was their thing. They walked at a fast pace, and they just talked about everything and anything those 5 miles, and it was every evening when they got home from work. And they lived in the same town, went to the same college, and just did it all through their careers. And that was their thing. It could also be for money. You look at the top Kenyan, the top Ethiopian runners. You win $100,000 for winning a New York Marathon or $200,000. That sets you for life. You can actually own a village for that, take care of everything, and there's tremendous drive. There's not many ways to get out of poverty in these countries, but running is one of them. And so it's important to make what makes you happy, and then try to involve that into your training. So a sense of accomplishment. You tend to need goals, competition, or events to reach their goals. So like for myself, I am innately lazy. I don't think I will do stuff unless there's something down the road that I can, and so this is a wildflower 100-mile bike race I did, or bike ride that I did last year. And so I do these stupid things like say, okay, I'm going to do the death ride. And then I sort of, okay, it's like 6 weeks before the death ride and I have to pick it up. So if I give myself goals, it gets me out of bed. It gets me in the evening to do something, because I sort of feel like I have to try to, if I don't give myself a goal, then I don't tend to just do it for fun. Often these people that sort of more internally driven, they often train by themselves. They tend to be introverted people. And if you ever have to do a fun 100-mile ride, the Wildflower is actually one of the best rides. It's in Chico, and it's the first week of April, actually. Social, that's more like my wife. She likes to train with others. post-race events are nearly as important. Like after the World Championships, I would typically, if I did well, yeah, I'd go out and celebrate. If I didn't do well, I'd sometimes sit in my hotel room inside of, like, read a book or something, where my wife is always at the party, being the life of it. They identify themselves with interactions between other athletes or their friends, and they're externally driven. They often large groups of exercise, and it's not right or wrong, it's just what makes you feel good. For a lot of people, having someone to train with or work with is much more fun than going out there by yourself. And then here we talk about Mute, and he's the gentleman in the middle there. He won the Boston Marathon. The year he won it, he ran a 2:02. They decided it was not a world record because there's slight downward decline because it goes from Boston, it tends to go toward the ocean. So because of decline, it was not a world record, but it was an incredible run. These guys, when you go to, they've had all these, what's the secrets of the Kenyans and the Ethiopians? Why are they such good runners? The truth is the U.S. could be a powerhouse in running, and no one could ever beat us if we had the same motivation. These guys, they don't have many options in life. They have high schools in Kenya where they have 3 or 4 sub-4-minute milers. The U.S. has only had 4 high school students ever go under 4-minute miles. So what ends up happening is they start running at a very early age. They're pushed by their parents, by their community leaders, and they're always trying to figure out who's the fastest. Then they go through junior high, high school. The competition starts to pick up, but everybody's running. And then they have a training camp, and everyone's invited. There's no, like, doesn't make a difference you won an Olympic gold medal or you're a high school athlete. You go train, and they run 20 miles a day for about 2 weeks in a row. And the sort of survivors of that then are the ones that go on to the World Championships and Olympics that year. So it's very cutthroat, but they all want to make that big paycheck, bring it back, have their own community, be the king, and live the good life for the rest of their lives. And so and a lot of them that I've met in the past didn't really enjoy running that much. They just want the rewards from it. So they're very monetarily driven. So Drive, have any of you ever seen the movie Loneliness, the Long Distance Runner? It's not a funny movie. It's actually a very serious movie. It starts off with this teenager. He's just out there running. And there are people that they just have this internal drive to do something. He enjoyed running, but the reason he enjoyed running was because it was a way of dealing with the problems in his life. And it's a story about an English lad. He was like 16, 17, and he was arrested for stealing something from a bakery. And he went into a reform school. And it turned out he was one of the faster runners in the reform school. And to show the success of the reform school, the headmaster wanted to compete against a public, much more renowned school. And so he was sort of put out there. He got all these special favors, got special meals, actually got to go outside the reform school, got to run on the roads outside. And then when the big race day came, he ran, and he was easily past the best runner of the other school, and with just yards of being able to win, he stopped, and he stared at the headmaster and refused to run anymore, and the other guy from the other school went and won the race. And he basically, that was his control it was a sort of a movie about rebellion. But he knew that he could get all this stuff, but he also knew that he was in control, and by doing this, he made the headmaster look bad. And then the last scene is he's back working in a machine shop or something back in the reform school, and he's not able to run anymore. But so there's people run for a number of different reasons. For myself, if I don't exercise, I can get antsy and like, Jesus, I just don't feel good about myself. But I think part of me is for so many years, from the ages of 6 to 12 years of age, just watching I think if I'd exercised like normal kids, played baseball, played football, whatever, I probably wouldn't have turned out like I am. But because I was told for so many years I couldn't do something, I always thought that after some point I'd retire and not want to exercise anymore, but that hasn't happened. I don't think it will. Aerobic exercise. The neat thing about this is recent research. It increases neurogenesis. Nerve cells do not grow very easily, and that's why things like paraplegia, quadriplegia, strokes, when you have damage to a nerve, it doesn't do very well. In younger children, you sometimes get some neurogenesis, but after the age of 30, it's downhill. Your brain starts to slowly lose its cells, lose some of the connections, and hopefully you have enough reserve that you can get by until you pass away. But they've shown that with aerobic exercise in animals that you can actually, and they do these in mice because humans don't tend to like to exercise really hard and then have someone cut open the brain. But when mice are trained heavily, they end up increasing more actual brain cells. And so that's very different than what we thought that nerves did. It also has been shown in both humans and animals that you increase the transmitters, the neurotransmitters, the dopamine, the serotonin. Dopamine is associated with Parkinson's disease. Serotonin is associated with depression. Norepinephrine is associated with depression. And so there's decreased risk for Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's dementia. The Alzheimer's dementia was just a recent study. And so people who've exercised regularly throughout their life are at decreased risk for these things, and they tend to be just happier people. So arousal, if you ever have a chance to go on YouTube, look up the bat flying or whatever. This is in Switzerland. This looks like just a little bee in the middle of a mountain, and he's flying through it at 200 miles per hour. And they show how he trained for it, and they put up like a post with a paper banner, and twice he hit it. And then this was the real thing, and he just shoots through there. Now with these bat wings, they've landed on land and they've landed on water. But there are people out there that life is just not thrilling enough, and they call them type T personalities, and they just need something to drive them. And everyone's different. I've had some friends who've done this. Unfortunately, most of them aren't alive anymore. This other one to the left that's Alex Honnold, H-O-N-N-A-L-D. He's from Sacramento, California. He's climbing Half Dome, 4,000 feet without any protection. He got within 200 feet of the top. The day before he climbed with protection, he felt like it was just so easy. He felt like he was walking on the ground. I mean, he's a world-class climber, but no one had ever gone 4,000 feet without protection. He's 23 years old. He did it, but he said 200 feet from the top, there's this one area where he just started to get himself psyched out, and he had to make this move. He felt that the knob was a little slippery. He stood there for 5 minutes, and he did this entire 4,000-foot climb in under 3 hours. But he said at one point, I knew I had to step on that, and I was either going to live or die. He stepped on it and then made it up. And so, but there's just different personalities in the world. But if you're one of these arousal people, move out of Klamath Falls. I don't want to take care of you. Although most like that, I'll get to take care of you. You'll just kill yourself.
Can you rent those squirrel suits?
The what?
Squirrel suits?
I don't think you can. I wouldn't advise doing it. One of my former friends used to do a lot of paragliding. He died. And then another one of my friends thought he could run Niagara Falls. He didn't make it. And now the other side, how many have been to Half Dome in Yosemite? If you ever have a chance, go to Half Dome. And there is another way up Half Dome. Bring binoculars because the climbers are really impressive. You'll see these little dots and you'll try to convince yourself, is that a person or not? But if with binoculars you can see, and it's just fascinating to watch them as they go up there. There is the backside of Half Dome, which is just a hike. But even at the backside, they have these cables set up that the last part of the hike is 45 degrees to the top of Half Dome, and the Park Service has put up cables, and they're steel cables, and you just pull yourself up that. And so it's not that hard, but you are up there. You would slip down pretty easily. And when I was up there, there's a lightning storm coming in. I've never seen so many people move so quickly. And then a lot of times when I'm on vacation, I just like either to run at sunup or sundown. And I love to run on the beach and just go for an easy run for 2 or 3 miles. And it's a way of relaxing, so it can decrease your arousal. You don't have to be flying through mountains or climbing 4,000-foot peaks. You can just enjoy going for a nice, easy run, and that can calm you down and decrease the arousal state. And again, that's what drugs do. Some people like the feel of meth, cocaine. Some people like the feel of morphine, some of the other narcotics. And everybody has sort of their own set point. Not that we all do those things. So why should someone run? It increases your sleep quality. They've shown that if you run every morning that you tend to sleep much better at night. Not only do you sleep more, but you have deeper sleep, your REM sleep or REM sleep much more. It decreases depression, anxiety. In fact, they've shown that exercise can be as effective as some of the medications out there. It helps with weight loss. but be careful with exercise because you don't really nearly burn enough calories. It's so easy. You may burn 200, you may burn 300 calories during a walk, jog, or run or something. That's a candy bar. And if you eat, it's so easy to overeat in the U.S. nowadays. It improves bone and knee health. There was a thought that years ago that running hurts your knees. They've now done large studies looking at runners, and runners have less osteoarthritis, less knee pain, stronger joints than people who are non-runners. And there's something about the cartilage or the synovium actually needs some intermittent pressure, and it actually tends to help keep it stronger and less degenerative changes. In the hospital, I rarely ever take care of someone who's an avid athlete. I end up taking care of the person who just never did anything, sat around. They have horrible hip and knee arthritis, and there is something for exercise to prevent some of those things. Again, we talked about the decreased risk for dementia, and interestingly, it decreases risk for cancer. Now, they've also looked at this. It doesn't make it, because we know that being overweight can increase your risk for cancer. We know being a male can, but they looked at all these other factors. But if you just exercise alone, and even if you're heavy, the exercise alone will decrease your risk for having cancer. So just some of the studies. This was a study a couple years ago. But and it wasn't necessarily running. It was just some type of aerobic and light lifting done 30 minutes 5 times a week. And if you were a smoker, you still lived an extra 4.1 years. One of my favorite patients is I had this guy, he was a little bit of a hypochondriac, but he loved his marijuana. And he just had to smoke marijuana. He said that's what calmed him down and everything. But he was so scared of getting lung cancer, getting all the other cancers associated with smoking, that the guy could run 5 or 10 miles, and he did that 5 or 6 times a week. And was actually a very good runner despite his smoking habit. And he would see me like every 2 weeks to have me tell him that no, he's not going to die when he turns 50. And then non-smokers got an extra 3 years. Cancer survivors, so if you had been cured of cancer and continued to exercise, you're compared to cancer survivors who did not exercise, you lived an extra 5.3 years. And then heart disease, some big benefits, 4.3 years increased lifespan. I had a gentleman who's in his mid-40s. He started having chest pain. This was when I worked in New Hampshire. I sent him down to Dartmouth. They did a cardiac cath on him. He had severe end-stage or end-vessel disease. There was nothing they could do. They couldn't stent him. They couldn't bypass him because the disease was into the heart muscle. And they basically said, go home, enjoy your family while you can. And he got so scared, he decided to go on a cholesterol medication, and he started walking 5 miles a day. This was 12 years ago. He's still alive, walking 5 miles a day. And he's not had any further chest pain. I'd be interested to see if they'd cath him again. And I think what's happened is like dogs get heart attacks all the time, but they have a lot of collateral circulation, so even when they have something, there's enough blood flow somewhere else that it's not a critical thing. And that's what exercise does, is can give you collateral circulation even if you have fairly severe heart disease. And this is a study that came out in July. This is my favorite thing. I just run 5 minutes now. But running 5 minutes a day, and this is based off the Cooper Institute. When I was a kid in the 60s, the Cooper Institute started studying people, and it's down in Texas, and they started doing like astronauts and military people and what kept them fit. Ken Cooper was the original founder. He has since passed away. But they basically have gotten huge volumes of data on people who exercise regularly, and they found that just 5 minutes a day decrease your risk of dying from heart disease by 30%, and it adds 3 additional years of life. What's interesting is running more than that didn't seem to make any difference. So that's all you need is 5 minutes a day. Part of it is also the exercise. Running for most people is fairly intense. Most of us just jump out and run. That 5 minutes, and there may be something to intensity, and a lot of you probably have heard about HIIT or high intensity exercise at this point. We'll talk a little bit about that, but putting some intensity in your workouts may also be very beneficial. So all you need is 5 minutes a day. So when you go to Fedmeyer, park at the far end, sprint in, and then sprint out. So how to begin to exercise? A nice thing is to access your fitness level. You don't have to do this if you're healthy. I don't want someone out there that just got out of the hospital to go out there to the OIT track and try to run a mile as fast as they can. But if you're a pretty healthy person, don't have chest pain, no problems. And most of the time, they've done studies where they say, well, contact your physician, consult your physicians. Most physicians don't know about exercise, and most physicians are very conservative when it comes to exercise. In most cases, the studies show that whatever you do, like my severe COPDers or my guys with heart disease, yeah, walk for 5 minutes if that's all you can do. Then try to go a minute further every 2 weeks or something. Go slow, but don't go out there and do a mile time trial. But everyone can start exercise no matter how sick or ill, as long as they go slow enough and short enough. And then consider your goals. Is my goal to lose weight? Is my goal to be an Olympic athlete? Is my goal to have fun and go down to the creamery and drink beer every Friday night with my friends that I run with? So just what is it? What tickles you? What makes it fun for you? Because if you can't make it fun, you're not going to stick to it. Create a balanced program. Yeah, you can leave this talking, I'm really motivated, probably not. But you'll leave this talk and you go out there and you run a half hour every day for the next week. Then you're crippled. Go about it slowly, have a balanced approach to it, and don't be a Nazi to your program. Be flexible. We all have jobs, we all have illnesses, we all have family, and some days you just can't do everything. And so you can't be pulling out your hair because you didn't get your run in that day or you didn't go to the gym. Just skip it and then pick it up the next day. Go at your own pace. Build activity in your daily routine. I hate to tell you, I watch most of my TV on my bike. I don't have that much time in the world, so what I do, and people wonder how I watch America's Got Talent, I can tell you it's on tonight, it's 8 o'clock. And what I do is I tape the shows, and then I get up at 5 a.m. and I go on my bike for an hour, and I just flip through and I always fast forward through the commercials so I can see all the acts. And then I just get to watch a 2-hour show tonight, I'll watch an hour tomorrow morning, and I'll be riding my bike. And for me, it's a way of relaxing. Dr. Glidden, and I actually work pretty hard to it, like depending on the act, I sometimes sprint the whole time during the act, and then rest while Howard Stearns is talking, or whenever one of the panel talks, I'll have to sprint when they're talking. So I make games up with the TV. And then and so you can do that. Dr. Al Glidden, who some of you know, he has an elliptical strider in front of his TV, and the only time he watches TV is if he's on that. So there's some simple, easy things to do, and it really doesn't feel that much. Because for me, if I had to like get on my bike and go outside or something, I do like to watch TV, but I do it while I exercise. Include different activities. It doesn't have to be all running. In fact, it's probably better to run a little bit, bike a little bit, put a little swimming in there, and do some cross training. Again, be flexible, not necessarily flexible yourself, but flexible with your schedule. And then allow yourself to recover. If you've just done 2 or 3 hard days, you did a race over the weekend, and it's Monday morning, and you're supposed to go get on and watch Howard Stern that night from the night before, and you're exhausted, maybe a better thing is to sleep in that morning, take a day off, and recover. And as we get older, that's sort of the biggest difference. I have 2 young sons, and they're killing me both in running and weightlifting now. They sleep like hours and hours and hours while I get up to work, so it's my sleep deprivation that's making me weaker, but I actually think it's age. So an example, Monday you can lift weights for just 30 minutes. And again, it's got to be short, get in there, get out, unless you really like to run long distances and you just like to go out there for an hour or 2, and if your schedule can support that. In this day and age, it's hard to find people who have that much free time. So Monday, just a quick 30-minute weight workout, just big body exercises, bench press, pull-ups, some lat type exercise, some stomach, some back, some squats. Just big muscles. You don't have to do like my son does. He does like an hour worth of, he did 100 sets of, not 100 sets, he did 10 sets of 20 curls for 200 curls yesterday. That was his workout for his biceps. But he's 20 years old and has nothing else to do with life. Wednesday, do something, or Tuesday, then you can go for a 30-minute walk run. You don't have to run 30 minutes all out. You can run it, you can do some sprints, you can just walk the whole 30 minutes, you can do a jog for 30 minutes, whatever sort of tickles you at that time. Wednesday, maybe offload and do some elliptical, swimming, cycling to give the joints a little bit of a rest. Thursday, another 30-minute walk run. Friday, another minute, another weight. You only need weights probably once or twice a week to maintain your strength or even to increase. And then Saturday, make that your big day. You want to do your 5K running race, you want to do a 2-hour hike, or you want to get on the bike for a couple hours, go up Hammock or Mountain. And then Sunday, take off and just drink beer, have a barbecue, and don't worry about it. And this isn't that hard to do if you sort of put your mind to it and look at your schedule and do things that you like to do. Some people don't like to hike, but they love to hunt. and they just go out and carry their guns with extra weight and run around. So there's multiple ways of sort of doing the same thing. So improvement, the muscle responds to increased workloads, and it's very simple. If you want to get stronger or you want to be able to run longer distances, you just need to do it, but you need to do it in increments so you get up to there. And this can be in time, like if you want to run, say, an hour, we'll start off at 10 minutes, 15, 30, 40, and eventually work your way up to an hour over a year or so. It can be done intensity, you can run it even faster, you can do kind of a combination of both. And one of the favorite things, and I actually last weekend did a Tabata workout with my 14-year-old son. How many know what Tabata is? So I think it was Izumi Tabata. He's a Japanese researcher. And back in the early 90s, late 80s, he did some research with the long track skating Japanese team. And what he did is they did one group that did their traditional workouts, so typically a long warm-up. They did something like 10 times 500 meters. Then they did some distance work, and then they warmed down. And their full workouts were 2 hours a couple times a day. Then he took another group that were all still world-class skaters, and he just had them warm up for 10 minutes, and then they did 8 repetitions of 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. But the 20 seconds on was as all out as you could possibly go. And then just a couple minute warm down, and that's it. So basically they had 15-minute workouts, and then after a period of several months they compared the speed, strength, and everything between the two skating groups. The Tabata people were actually slightly faster. And so there's something for all-out efforts that are repeated. So again, 5-minute warm-up, 4 minutes of 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. In his original study he did 8 minutes, and then a 2-minute warm down. You can do it with running, you can do it with cycling, you can do it with body weight exercises. Try to do 4 minutes of 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off of push-ups as fast as you can. What my son and I did the other day, we did dips, we did pull-ups and sit-ups. Neither one of us could walk out of the gym afterwards. If I have only 10 minutes in my day to do something, I'll sometimes just squat, and I'll go 20, put a pretty light weight on, like 95 pounds, squat for 20 seconds as fast as I can, 10-second rest. And do that for 4 minutes, and I'm totally sore, can't walk the next day, and it will do something to keep you in shape. So you only need minutes in a day if you're pretty motivated. Now you do need to be, it does have to be all out intensity. The people at the gym stare at me when I do this, but you can put your treadmill at a very high intensity. You can speed up the speed up to the top end of it, and then you can run as fast as you can for 20 seconds on it, and then I hold on to the sides and put my feet off for 10 seconds, and then jump back on and just hope I don't fall off. And you can just do 4 minutes of that. And again, that's really high intensity stuff. Or you can do it outside. You can do it anywhere with anything. If you do weights though, work slowly into it because it can be pretty hard at first. So another secret, train in the morning. Our lives are so complicated, you just never know. My best laid plans, I'll think, okay, I'm going to sleep in this morning because I'm going to go work out at 5 o'clock, and then something happens, and it doesn't. And then I get frustrated because as the time goes on, now it's 7:30, now it's 8, and now I'm like, Jesus, now do I want to work out, try to eat dinner and go to bed, or should I just skip it? The easiest thing, and the studies have shown that if you exercise first thing in the morning, you tend to be more likely to exercise. And so one of the keys about the morning, though, is you can't have to think about it. You have to basically roll out of bed, roll into your shorts, into your shoes, have your shirt there, and just walk out the door. And while you wake up, you're like, oh, Jesus, I'm running. Because if you have to start scrounging for your shorts, looking for your socks, can't find your shoes, you're going to crawl back into bed. So just get really ready and just lay everything out. And what's nice is sometimes I find, like if I'm going to do a relatively hard workout in the morning, is to have a small snack, like a little breakfast bar, sometimes banana, and just start to eat that for the first half mile or so, and then start to pick it up. Know your route. Unfortunately, especially in the winter, it's dark, and so you don't want to be running in strange areas where you can twist your ankle, break something. So know where you're going. Start slow and build into it. The mornings are better for the sort of slow, steady type of work in endurance. And they've shown that you're strongest and you're fastest about 5 p.m. So world-class athletes will do their distance stuff in the morning, but then they'll do their sprint workouts or heavy lifting at about 5 p.m. And then one thing that can help you with flexibility, and not that you need to be flexible, there's a lot of changes on how to stretch and should we be flexible or not. Actually, runners who tend to be less flexible tend to be faster and less injury prone. But like I play golf, and it doesn't look, at my age, if I have like a tiny little short golf swing. So I do some passive stretching before I go to bed and then go to bed. The problem with passive stretching is it decreases your muscle strength. They've done things where they like stretch your quads out and they measure your ability to contract the quad. Just a passive stretch, what happens is you've got these receptors in the tendons that want to relax that muscle, and so it weakens that muscle. And so after a passive stretch, your muscle can be reduced by up to 30%. And they've done things with like high jumpers where they stretch passively their quads and their hamstrings and went to high jump, and again, their heights are much lower than before they stretched. So warming up, typically you want to walk for a couple minutes, then you want to jog, and most of you have felt this when you're warming up, you all of a sudden feel like this glow, like all of a sudden you're just about ready to sweat. You're not panting, you're not crazy, but you feel like things are starting to warm up. That's the sweet spot. Then you begin dynamic stretching, and I'll show you what dynamic stretching is. But what's interesting is you can increase your strength, you can increase your jumping ability, you increase your bench press ability if you do dynamic stretching, because that rebound, and it's interesting, when I was in junior high school, we were told not to rebound, just do the passive stretching. Now it's totally changed where everybody's doing this dynamic stretching and not doing passive stretching. And then depending on where you are, if you're running a 5K race and you're going to kind of walk it, you don't have to do any more workup. If you are going to start going out and you're going to run like Sean, then and you're going to run like a say 15-minute, 16-minute 5K, then you may want to go a 2-minute pace run at the pace so you get a feel of what the race is going to feel like. And then do 5-second stride outs where you kind of are sprinting, but you're relaxed, just stretching everything out. And then you'll be ready to start a 5K or 10K race. So dynamic stretching is basically just keep things moving. You can swing your legs, you can do lunges and then twist to one side. My favorite is just to skip around and just try to get my knees as high as I can at my age, or stretch out your shoulders, and then you can just walk on the ground, stretch back up, walk on the ground, stretch back up. And this is the stretching that actually increases your strength, and it's actually been recently shown in the last couple of years to also decrease the injury rate, where passive stretching seems to increase the injury rate. Warm down, you don't have to do it. There have now been multiple studies the last couple of years. It seems to make sense, yeah, if you've been working really hard. The truth is, most of us, when we finish working out, we're just not going to lie down on the floor. Most of us are going to walk, step in the shower, shower off, or do something, eat something. So we're kind of just warming down. But the theory was that if you're an athlete and your heart was beating at its max, and then your legs were all dilated with its blood vessels, that when you slowed down too quickly, your heart would drop, you would decrease cardiac output, and all the blood was pooled in your legs. That's shown out to be true. Your body's pretty good at getting it where it needs to go. And if time is really important to you, warm up, but don't warm down. Just jump in and do whatever you need to do to get out of there. So this comes to the inspirational stories. How many know who Roger Bannister is? He's one of my sort of heroes. He set the world record. He was the first person to break 4 minutes in a mile. He did it in 1954. He did it at his medical school track. He was a British medical school student. He was 25 years old. He actually skipped his gynecology lectures because that's the only, he figured he wasn't going to be a gynecologist. So he skipped his lectures in the middle of the day, and he trained only 45 minutes a day and was a world-class runner. In the 52 Olympics, he was really disappointed. He was one of the favorites to win. The problem is he trained so little. He had one race in him. He didn't have more. And in the 52 Olympics, they added not only heats, they added a semifinal and a final. And by the time he got to the final, he could only get 4th place, even though at that time he held one of the fastest times in the world. And then after that, he made it a goal to break 4 minutes. What was interesting is when he only had 45 minutes, and the guy did similar work hours to the residents, well, actually longer work hours than the residents do now. But the guy worked about 100 to 120 hours a week and did this world record at the same time. Very motivated, very disciplined. He didn't dilly-dally. He did a warm-up. He knew exactly what pace he wanted to run. He ran those paces in intervals like 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters. and then quarter miles and whatever. And every workout had a very specific purpose, and then he was able to do this and set the world record. And he became a neurologist. He's 85, still lives, and he's now Sir Roger Bannister. And actually, when asked what his greatest contribution to sort of mankind, he actually says his medicine. This is Amy Palmero Winters. This is the Badwater Marathon, the 100-mile race at 100 plus degrees in Death Valley in July. What you can't see easily, she's got a blade. She lost her leg in when she was 19 years old in a motorcycle accident. She underwent, in a 3-year period of time, 25 surgeries to try to save that leg. Eventually they had to cut it off. She was a very good high school and swimmer and runner, and then she decided later to, well, I'll run with the blade. The most impressive thing, this marathon, this 100-mile race took her 66 hours to complete. They normally only, and if any of you have ever taken care of people with prosthesis, it's not as simple as it looks. I mean, those prosthesis, you think you get blisters from your shoes and stuff, imagine running 100 miles in 100-degree plus heat and what that does to your stump. And they can just be bloody messes, having blood coming down. And she toughed it out. She finished it in 66 hours. That's how long she ran and walked to get through that race. But I think the most impressive thing about her is she's the world record holder for in the Paralympics for the marathon. She's run a 3:04 marathon. That has beat all the men and all the women. So she's the top distance runner for men and women in the Paralympics. Eno Zadopek, how many know him? We're going back a ways. But I really liked him because he was one that, his favorite story, I believe it was the 1956 Helsinki Olympics, and he won the 5,000 race, 5,000 meters, he won the 10,000 meters, had never run the marathon, but was known for his extreme workouts, and decided to run the marathon. And 15 miles through the marathon, he's running with the world record holder at the time from Great Britain, and he asked the world record holder, what do you think of the pace? The Great Britain guy thought, well, I'm going to try to psych him out. He said, I think it's a little slow. Emil Zadopek picked it up, won the gold medal, and the British marathoner dropped out. He was renowned for, he did most of his training in his army boots, because he felt like, well, if I'm going to run and I have more resistance, he ran in heavy snows up to his thighs to try to get more strength training from his running. He did these workouts where he would run 100 miles in one day just to see if he could do it. And this was back in the 40s and 50s before we had all these ultramarathon things. And he did win 2 Olympic golds, and then that one Olympics where he won the 5, 10K, and marathon, all in world records. And he was also a big proponent of the Communist Party, and he's Czechoslovakian. And then when the Communist Party came into fold, he began to realize maybe that's not the best, and evidently became an outspoken Democrat, and actually was sort of stripped of a lot of his honors in Czechoslovakia. So this is a neat story. How many, what's the NPR, TED Talks. How many listen to TED Talks? This woman was a TED Talk. There was an author who wrote the book Born to Run, and he gave a TED Talk, and he talked about this woman. And this is Toronto Tulu, and it's not the taller blonde, it's a shorter black woman. This is the New York Marathon in 2009. Paula Radcliffe had won this race. She's the tall blonde, and when I say tall, Paula is probably 5'6", 5'7", but Tulu is probably like 4'10", 4'11". Paula Radcliffe has and still holds a world record for women in the marathon, 2:15. In a lot of countries, that'd be an Olympic qualifying time for the men. No one has come within 4 minutes of that time. She is considered unbeatable. She had won New York Marathon 2 years previously, had been unbeaten in the world for about 3 years. And then during this race, she started to cramp. And at this point of the race, this is about 22 miles, and Tulu, who actually won an Olympic gold medal in 1992 at the age of like 37, decided that she was going to continue running because they paid her to run. She's from Ethiopia, but she'd kind of become a middle-of-the-pack international runner. She was no longer threatened to win races. And when she saw Paul Radcliffe having a problem, she dropped back with her and sort of said, here, I'll pace you back up to the lead pack. And for the next half mile, ran with her and said, you can do this, just tough it out. And actually handed her a water bottle that she's holding, and really wasn't out there to crush her or put her down or anything. She just thought, you know, this is the better runner. She should be the one winning the race. And then Paul Radcliffe told her, I can't do it anymore, went off. And so Tula went up, caught the two lead women, and actually ended up winning the race. And she's still running today in her 40s. This is actually a personal hero of mine. This is Baha Singh. Do any of you know who he is? This is one of the greatest. He's 102 right now. This is him running just outside of London. And when he was 89 years old, his wife died. He became depressed, and he decided for the first time in his life he's going to take up running. And he just did a little running here and there. He decided he was going to try a marathon at 95. The first marathon he entered, he thought it was 26 kilometers and not 26 miles. He was surprised how long it took him. But he ran that first marathon in about 6 hours, and he since then set the record for 90-year-olds marathon in 5 hours and 40 minutes, which is a pretty reasonable pace for someone in their 90s. When he turned 100, he entered a master's track race and ran every event between 100 and 10K, setting world records. So he ran the 100-meter, 200-meter, 400-meter, 800-meter, 1,500-meter, 2-mile, 3-mile, 5K, 10K, and marathon. Did it all in one weekend. Now the thing is there weren't a lot of record holders because a lot of the events didn't have anyone that ever competed at this age. So he set every record at 100 years of age, and then ran competitively until he was 101. And then I think he did a marathon then at like 8 minutes or something. And then he figured that was sort of the highlight. He could never approach that, but he runs and walks. He said when I was younger, meaning 89 to 95, he used to run 4 hours a day. He would run or walk. He said when I was younger, I used to run most of that. Now that I'm older, I walk most of it. But he's still doing 4 hours on the road every day. So in summary, exercise and running are part of our evolutionary makeup. We're kind of born to run. Now, what's interesting is what some people theorize is if we're so meant to run, why is America not running? What's going on? And I actually read a theory about this. The thought is that we're turning into such an instant gratification type of society that if we don't get that gratification within 30 seconds or so, we're on to something else. And for the endorphins, actually, it takes about 30 minutes of a gradual exercise to begin making these endorphins. And most of us aren't patient enough to make it for 30 minutes. And so that may be one of the things is we've just become a really quick sort of gratification type society. There are tremendous benefits to regular exercise. We talked about dementia, we talked about bone health, joint health, psychological health, dementia. But figure out what motivates you. Everyone is different. What makes me run may be something different than Stephanie or Catherine. We all have different reasons, and there's no reasons better than another reason. You don't have to tell people your reason. Find a routine that's fun, that you're able to stick to, but it's also flexible. So this is Nelson Mandela. He ran cross country when he was in high school and college. Running taught me valuable lessons. And I think it's so important. This is my little editorial for the school system. I have 3 kids. They're all relatively decent athletes. I would love for one of them to go to the Olympics in something, but we'll see. But I think sports, music programs, those are the first things they cut out of school programs. And like for myself, medical school was a piece of cake compared to international competition. For me to have the discipline to wake up, to do the things I need to do, to train sometimes 6-8 hours a day, to see improvements, also to see disappointments and what am I going to do to get better or whatever. It really, and then when you realize you're sitting there for the Olympic trials, one boat is going to go in. Whoever wins is going to go, and everyone else is going home for that, and you can start training for another 4 years. In medical school, my first test, I was like, oh God. And I remember getting second highest score, and I was thinking, you know, that really didn't make a difference. It's so much easier knowing you can be second and still do well than have to be first all the time. But sports really gave me the discipline to get through medical school pretty easily. And I think for kids, I watched my kids as they've grown up through sports, They do all very well academically because the discipline is sit down and study, know, set goals. I think those are all things sports can give you, and I hate to see them taking them out of some of the schools because of problems with funding. So Nelson Mandela in cross-country competition, training counted more than intrinsic ability. I'm not a natural athlete. I didn't start actually doing any athletics until I was 12 years of age, didn't actually do any competition until I was 15. I was like really behind. But you can do it with training, and it can compensate for any natural aptitude with diligence and discipline. And then he applied this to everything I did, and that's Nelson Mandela. So that's it. Any questions?